Good morning, savages. Let's talk coffee. Viking Coffee, Evan Armstrong's brand out of Bowling Green, Ohio. He is making that awesome old man strength coffee that everybody loves who tries it. I keep telling people, all you got to do is get a little bit of it in your system and you will be psyched on it. Trust me, it's better than that store-bought shit you guys are drinking now, and it's way better than Starbucks. So check out VikingCoffeeCo.com. Use the code VikingCoffee10 at checkout. While you're there buying Old Man Strength, check out the rest of his brews. He's got several of them he is brewing up just for you. Cerberus Strength. Cerberus makes the best equipment out there for your strength journey, whether you're a strongman or a Highland Games athlete or a power lifter. All you have to do is give them a holler and get on board the Cerberus train. Wraps, straps, belts, sleeves, anything you could possibly want. They also have smelling salts and tacky and sandbags. Their sandbags are awesome, guys. I know you are getting ready for indoors and getting ready for the Arnold in March. Go ahead and buy a sandbag from them and get some indoor training in. They will not hurt your floors, and you can fill up to whatever you want. So check out Cerberus-strength.us. Use the code REFINESAVAGE10 at checkout for 10% off. Some of my favorite people on the planet are my new friends at Warrior CBD. Here's the steal. So, I always let my bottle. I don't plan ahead. I'm not a planner. I don't plan ahead. So I always have this problem where I accidentally run out of CBD oil. So I've got this machine, my CPAP. It gives me some analytics on how I sleep. So I went a week without CBD oil, and my analytics were way off the charts bad. Got my bottle last night, took a little bit before bed, boom, right back to that state that is going to make me more refreshed and invigorated and the sexy beast you've all grown to love. Get yourself some CBD oil. Don't get the garbage stuff. Go right to people who have built this from the ground up and who are fighters and grapplers and jiu-jitsu experts who know what it's like to be stressed out and beat up. Head on over to warriorcbdofficial.com and use the code WARRIOR20 off at checkout. Or check them out on Instagram and talk to Nancy directly at the company, and she will help you figure out what you need. SeriousSteel.com. Serious Steel are my buddies. I love these guys. They are really, they just do business the way you expect a company to do business. Or maybe not how you expect them, but how they should do business. So, they are so helpful and so great, and these are the guys that you need to be going to for your equipment. Whether you're you're setting up a home gym or a commercial gym or a CrossFit gym, whatever, check these guys out. They have the best bands, plates, everything you could possibly want. These guys have. On top of that, they're just great people. So check out SeriousSteel.com for any kind of gym equipment you may need. SeriousSteel.com. Use the code SAVAGE at checkout for 10% off. Deep in the heart of Bozeman, Montana, we have Stay Classy Meat. Stay Classy is they are just taking the world by storm. There's a couple different meat box manufacturers out there, but these guys are far and away the best ones out there. You can go to their website. You can do a build your own box, or they've got several different options for boxes. I get the Elite box. If you guys have questions about what to get in your box, if you're doing a build your own, just shoot me a message and I'll help you out and tell you what I love. And I swear to God, there's nothing that I've gotten from them that I didn't like, but there are some things that I love, like the bison. My God, you got to try the bison. But check them out. Small batch farming. That's important if you care about where your meat comes from. It makes a difference in the taste. It makes a difference in the way you feel and how your energy levels are after you eat this meat. These animals are grass-fed. They're drinking from pure mountain streams. All that stuff makes a difference, not only in the quality of the meat, but just in the taste of the meat. I'm telling you, these guys are doing it right. StayClassyMeats.com. Use the code SAVAGE at checkout for 10% off. Finally today, Iron and Stone Strength. They have this gym up in the Buffalo area where they are just busting at the seams already, and they just opened it up. That's because people know these guys are legit. I just talked to Eric today there, and I was going to order some T-shirts for myself, and he told me to wait a day or two. By the time this podcast comes out, they will be back in stock, but he's selling so many T-shirts that they were out of stock when I recorded this. So their stuff is just so cool, and these guys are neck deep in powerlifting and strongman. You guys want to check these guys out. They're great people, great company, great gym. IronandStoneStrength.com. Use the code RefineSavage at checkout. Today on the show is Dustin Myers. Gut check, Dustin Myers. Dustin is a coach in Columbus, Ohio. Works with a lot of high-level grapplers and wrestlers, and he's training athletes. And we had a fantastic conversation. We are of like minds when it comes to training, and I really enjoyed this, and I expect him to be a guest on the show many, many, many more times. I know you're going to love this podcast. Check it out, share it with your friends, and enjoy it. And we'll see you at the end. All right. We are down in Columbus, Ohio, again with Coach Dustin Myers at Old School. What's the actual name of it?
The Old School Gym.
The Old School Gym.
Yes, sir.
I am so psyched, especially when I walked through the door. First of all, what did this place used to be before it was a gym?
So originally, I don't know what it was originally because it was, built in like the 1950s. But this structure is called a Kwanzaa hut, and they're like, when I describe it to people, I say it looks like an old airplane hangar. It's kind of the metal. So if you can visualize an airplane hangar, that's what it looks like. There was a lot of surplus of these buildings, post World War II. And so there's a lot of them kind of floating around in, outside of cities or whatever. But so Maverick Motors, who owns the business here behind us, they had used it for storage. It was originally what they had their automotive shop in. And then in like the late 90s or whatever, they built their current building on the back lot there, and then just used this for storage. So at the time I was training, Sam Schaefer, who owns the building. I was training his wife, Kathy. I'd trained her for a few years. She'd lost 80 pounds, done really well. And, just one day, Corey, my partner, had said, "Hey, why don't you ask Kathy what they're doing with that old building?" I was like, "Oh man, they use that for storage. They're not going to rent that." He said, "Why don't you just ask them?" And so I went to Kathy and I said, "Hey, what are you guys doing with that old Kwanzaa hut? We'd like to put our gym in there." And she said, "You know what? Someone drives by there every week for the last 20 years and asks us to rent that building. We always tell them no, we're not interested." She's like, "But we want to give you guys a shot."
Awesome.
So we met with them and they said, "You know what? The place, piled full of junk. If you can clean it out, you do the rehab yourself, it's yours." So, I mean, they technically still own the building, but we spent, about a year, Corey and I, probably the first 6 months, getting all their junk out of here.
Yeah.
I mean, you've never met a pack rat like a mechanic, right? Because I think I can always use this part for later. But so they had 20 or 30 years of junk in here. We got all that stuff out. And then at the time, we were still running the original Old School Gym, which was in a much smaller location. And at the time, he and I were both full-time personal trainers. So we would be there all day personal training, and then we would come here in the evenings and on the weekend, 18-hour days on the weekends or whatever, just doing everything we could ourselves because we didn't have some big budget to hire a bunch of contractors and do it. So we taught ourselves how to do electric. We did plumbing. We did everything, And we spent about a year rehabbing the building, and then we moved over here.
Yeah, when I walked in, and I'm going to post some pictures on Instagram this afternoon, it was so cool to see because, first of all, I've been to probably a dozen gyms down here because everything happens in Columbus as far as weightlifting is concerned. And I'll tell you right now, this is my favorite so far because we talked before I got on the podcast, there's nothing in here you don't need.
Right.
And everything in here is made to get you stronger. I mean, there's tires and there's farmer's walk implements and yokes and pull-up bars everywhere you look. And then you've got the kind of the smaller bodybuilding area where you've got some basic machines that you need.
Well, I think, the thing I always tell people, because some people, what they're used to thinking of as a gym is not really a gym. They go to a big corporate gym and it's just like, there's just shit piled on top of shit everywhere that you do not need.
Yeah.
And someone will come here and say, "Well, do you have this?" I just say, listen, anyone who trains in any style, I don't care if you're a CrossFit athlete, if you're a bodybuilder, if you like to do cardio, if you're a strongman, power, whatever it is, you can come here and you have everything you need. So anyone who loves to train for the sake of training, improving, getting stronger, we have what they need here.
Yeah.
And if any of the fluff on top of that we don't have because our floor space is limited. We don't get room for it.
Yeah, and it's cool. I bet you get the same you get the same buzz out of it that I do when I get rid of something. It's like we haven't touched something in a year. It's like, get this fuck out of here. And then I got more space to put cool stuff in.
Yeah, no doubt.
Let's talk a little bit about. Well, let's talk about your clientele first.
Sure.
What kind of athletes are you getting? Mostly athletes in here. Number one. Or is it kind of a mix?
Yeah, well, we have a really good mix here. I mean, I would say that the common denominator is everyone that comes here is serious about working out.
Yeah.
And that means we don't have like the first of the year, the New Year's resolution crowd. You know, when I talk to people, they say, "Oh, what's your membership like in the summer?" I say, "Well, it's the same as it is in the winter."
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, we don't really have those big dips and ebbs and flows that a normal quote unquote gym has. Because people that come here, whether they're, we have the professional athletes, we have the competitive powerlifters, we have just the guys who really want to get their training in before they go into work, whether they work construction or a desk job or whatever it is. But the people that come here, they're serious about their workouts. They don't miss days. They come in, whether it's 3 days, 5 days, 7 days a week. And we kind of runs a go. I mean, when you came in today, you saw I was training, Betsy Johnson. She's in her early 50s.
Yeah.
And
she's in her early 50s. Wow, she looks great.
She looks great. Well, and here's the kicker. She didn't start working out until 3 years ago. She'd never worked out her whole life. Her husband, we call him Bruce the Beast, big guy like you, he's been a weightlifter his whole life. And he kind of got out of it for a while because, as he was raising kids or whatever, he started, he had to kind of like work out at the Y because he had daycare and things like that. And he lost the love for it because that wasn't how he grew up lifting weights in the 70s and 80s. And then just kind of randomly, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, he discovered our gym, started coming here and fell back in love with weight training. And then before you know it, he started bringing his wife in, and she'd never worked out her whole life. Now she's like obsessed with it.
Yeah.
She comes in, she boxes 2 days a week, does weights with me a couple of days a week, does all kinds of, she'll be in here, cussing and pushing sleds and everything. So
it's when I look at gyms, and we started out, I was telling you my wife was a CrossFit Regionals competitor. Mm-hmm. So we started out as a CrossFit gym, but I had been working with athletes forever. And when I look at other gyms, especially in our area, and they're so polished and they're so, the bathrooms are perfect and you walk in and, there's not a speck out of place and everything is, for me, I look at that and go, oh, fuck.
Right.
I'm afraid to move anything, And my gym, just like your gym, is like, everything's there. We know everything is. Let's just get in here and just do some solid work. There's no wasted effort. And for the people who love those kind of gyms, I think they're going to understand where I'm coming from. It's the same with my gym as your gym, as Westside Barbell, as Lexington Extreme, as Steve Pulsanella has a gym out in Philly called Iron Sport. It's all these gyms that are functional gyms in the truest sense of the word, where everything you have in there is for a purpose, and you can almost smell the athletes that have come through there as soon as you walk through the door.
No doubt.
And it's awesome.
Well, I'll tell you what. So you talked about people that love my gym, love your gym, love these style gyms. Let's even talk about the people that don't. I'm going to go with, my theory is, it's because, number one, they don't think it's still possible to train in a gym like this. I guarantee you take anyone, you go to a corporate gym, you pull someone aside, say, hey, do you love this gym? They'll say, oh yeah, I love Lifetime Fitness. And say, where did you get the best workouts of your life? They'll say, oh man, when I was in high school, my football weight room was dirty and it smelled and it was loud. Or, when I was 15, I lifted in my buddy's basement. And it's like, okay, that's where you found the love for it. That's where you get the best workouts of your life. Well, when people come and they find your gym or my gym, they walk in, it's like a rebirth for them. And it's like, well, they didn't think that this was still possible.
Yeah.
And that is usually the number one reaction I get from people when they walk in. They say, oh, this reminds me of my high school gym when I was in football. We had, I almost puked every day and it was awesome. And we're like, yes, you can have that again. This is just, all this is a bigger version of that.
Yep.
This is a bigger version of my dad's garage. That's where I grew up lifting weights. And then I get chills just thinking about it, really. So I'm going with, not only are these gyms for people who love to train, these gyms are for everyone, they just don't realize it.
Yeah.
They need, once they experience it, a woman like, Betsy, her kids are already raised, she'd never worked out her whole life. If you would have asked her before she came here, hey, do you think you love to lift in a powerlifting gym that's dirty and there's no air conditioning? She would have said, I don't even like to work out. I do Jane Fonda DVDs or whatever. She would have never said that she wanted to work out in a place like this. But once someone experiences it, the enthusiasm the motivation, it's contagious. So no matter what level you are, whether you're a pro strongman or whether you're someone like her who's just getting into it, when you find a real gym, it gets a hold of you in a different way.
Yeah, and it's the most it's the most outlaw thing you can do in this day and age, because gyms have become so sanitized and so commercial that you remember the old I don't know if you ever got into pro wrestling when you were a kid, but the old videos of like they would do like snippets of like the Road Warriors working out at some gym in Chicago, and it was just like this place, it was like the fixed weighted barbells and doing shrugs with 800 pounds, and you wouldn't have gotten guys like that training in LA Fitness. They would have been thrown out as soon as they started throwing 45s on the bar.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. Growing up, I honestly didn't even realize that corporate gyms existed.
Yeah.
So I grew up outside of Steubenville, Ohio, and grew up lifting in my dad's garage. When I was a kid, he would train. Well, I guess you would call it now train. At the time, he didn't even look at it. He was just helping out or whatever. In the early '80s, he was coaching football. So they didn't have a strength coach at the high school or whatever. So the kids on the high school team would come over and lift weights in the garage. So I grew up watching these kids lift, and then once I got into high school, or I think I was at 12 or 13 was when I started lifting there in the garage, and then even our high school at the time, the weight room was an old bus garage. It wasn't heated. There was coal mining belt on the floor, just like we have here, and so the only gym that was actually in Steubenville that we would go to sometimes to get a day pass was called Rocky Road. It's a big meathead gym there, down on in the basement of this old building, and then even when I went to my first year of college in '97, I went to Cincinnati for a year. And underneath the athletic facility, someone had put a gym called the Pit, down in the basement of this gym. And so we would work out down there. So really, until I came to Columbus, I'd never even really realized like California Family Fitness and these gyms existed.
Yeah.
And we had put, the first year I moved up here, this is my second year of college, we lived in a little townhouse on 12th Avenue right off High Street. And we had a crawl space. You'd go down into the basement, you had the laundry area, then there was a hole in the cinder blocks. You could pull yourself up and get in the crawl space, and it was about, barely 6 foot. I was one of my only roommates that could actually stand up without hitting my head. But we put a bench in there, we put some dumbbells, and we put a lamp in there, we hung a heavy bag, and that's where we'd work out. Well, then after, we got into the winter time, one day we're like, hey man, I think one of my buddies was like, hey, we heard there's lots of chicks at the rec center, let's go check it out. So we went there, and it wasn't the rec center. It was right up the street on Indianola Avenue. There used to be a Gold's Gym there. He's like, hey, I heard there's a Gold's Gym. We should go get a day pass and check this out. And in my head, I had the pumping iron book growing up.
Yeah.
I'm picturing Gold's Gym. I'm picturing Arnold.
Yeah.
I'm picturing the old Gold's Gym, the original. And I'm like, man, this is going to be fucking awesome, Gold's Gym. Well, we get there. I'll never forget, me and Corey walked in. Rod Stewart was playing on the radio. All of the benches were teal and purple.
Yeah.
And we looked around, it's real quiet, and we're like, man, like, what is this place? And we started warming up, we're doing pull-ups. We couldn't even like hang on to the bar, it was so shiny. Yeah. And we ended up doing 2 or 3 sets, and then we're just like, fuck this, man, let's go back to the crawl space. We didn't even finish our workout. So it really, right away, that was my first exposure to a corporate gym, and I just knew right away, like, okay, nicer is not better.
Yeah, and you're even seeing that, CrossFit I think was popular because you had gyms like that were just these warehouse grimy gyms, and now they're getting, so you walk into them and it's just like a global gym, and you've got thousands of dollars in, Concept 2 rowers and assault bikes and all this stuff, and then the bathrooms are just perfect and everything's in the place, and it's just...
Well, the corporate gyms have seen the money that's in CrossFit.
I think you're right.
So now it's like, okay, we're going to shoehorn this CrossFit onto our corporate gym.
Yeah.
But you know what? You're not going to get the same type of CrossFit workout at a gym like that.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to go in there and feel like you can put it all on the line and lay on the floor when you're done, like you're almost like you're near death, because it's just not that environment.
Yeah. I try to tell people when they come in, I get guys, my age, and they'll come in and I'll say, you remember how you felt that after that 2 weeks of football conditioning when you were in high school? And they're always like, yeah, I go, remember how great you felt, like you were indestructible? You could say that. I said, that's what I want you to feel like when you're training here. That brief 4 years of your life where you were indestructible, and that's the kind of workouts we're going to do. And that's the vibe I get in here too, man. I just love it. I'm so psyched that I came down here and got to see this place. We were originally supposed to do this at my place, but I'm glad I got to come down and check this out.
Yeah, I mean, just schedule-wise, I knew it wasn't going to work out.
Yeah.
But, maybe when we do a redo, maybe I'll make my way up yours, and we'll get some training there.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Tell me how this all started. Like, give me the background, the Dustin Myers 101 of how you got into wrestling and how you got into training and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. Well, real quick, I'll give my podcast a plug real quick.
Oh, yeah, please do.
Yeah, so it's called the Old School Gym Radio, and if you look that up on, I guess it's on SoundCloud and iTunes or whatever, but we actually did an origin story issue. It's almost 2 hours long, but Corey G and I sat down and kind of hashed out, from the beginnings of our first introduction to weightlifting all the way through.
Yeah.
So anyone who listens to this and thinks that I'm interesting and not a dickhead can go
bounce on over there.
Can bounce on over there and listen to that full episode. But anyway, so I guess kind of just to give you a real brief rundown. I talked about my dad's influence on me training and stuff like that. And then I grew up lifting weights in the garage. Corey G, who I owned the gym with, we met in 10th grade in weightlifting class. Became weightlifting partners throughout high school or whatever. Went our separate ways for a year. I went to Cincinnati for a year. He stayed home, worked in the coal mine to save up money to move to Columbus. I transferred to Ohio State. We lived together here. Had the little gym in the crawl space or whatever. And then the following year, probably 1999, he graduated with like a 1 year training certificate or whatever. He got a job training at a local gym, Scarborough Tennis Club. I went there and started working the desk, got like a desk job there. And then he had like a falling out with the manager, and he left and opened his own training studio on Bryce Road. And it was in 1999. At the time, I thought he was crazy. There was no Instagram, there was no Facebook, there wasn't this kind of persistent idea that like entrepreneurship is something you should explore. We didn't know anyone that had ever really owned a business or started a business. He didn't know anything about it, But he went and he was just determined. He started a training studio. I started training some clients there, and then after a couple years, I ended up graduating and then started realizing like, man, I don't think I want to be an English teacher now. I'm already doing what I really like to do. But I just at the time couldn't really conceptualize that you could make money training people or teaching people how to work out. So by that time I'm training full time. And then in 2003, the original Old School Gym, which had originally been the Warrior Gym and then Amazing Fitness, I went out of business out here in Pataskala, and we ended up somehow meeting the guy that owned it. We ended up buying that from him, like for 10 grand. We had to like take out a loan to buy this gym from him. And that was how we originally started the original Old School Gym. We were there for about 5 years, and then rehabbed this building, and then moved in here. And we've been here ever since.
Yeah.
But as far as how I got into training, kind of my style of training, and kind of what I'm known for at this point, which is training high level wrestlers. I had wrestled in high school, so I had a background in sport. Wasn't a good wrestler or anything like that. Kind of the joke I always make with the coaching staff down at OSU is I'm the worst wrestler in history to ever get to, train any of the Buckeyes. But, luckily I'm not on the mat training them. I train them in the weight room. So I think just because I had that background in wrestling, I was always kind of, drawn towards, training athletes in that sport. I would start working with some of the high school kids here locally and things like that. And having the background in the sport, I think, helped me kind of understand the energy demands and the strength demands differently than someone that had never actually put their foot on the line and wrestled. Just like with you having a past in wrestling, you understand how to train someone differently for the sport. So, fast forward to I think maybe 2010. You got to figure right around this time. We've been in business for 7 or 8 years. The gym's doing okay. We got a little bit of notoriety locally here. By that time I done some boxing, got some press from that or whatever. But social media is just starting to take off. And we're still no one really knows who we are at this point. Muscle Farm's starting to take off for Corey, but I ended up meeting Tommy Rollins through a mutual business contact. And Tommy Rollins was a couple years younger than me and was the first 4-time All-American for Ohio State wrestling back in the early 2000s. He was a 2-time national champ. He had been the Olympic trials runner-up in 2008, and then he retired. He was kind of the one that really first put Ohio State wrestling on the map and kind of helped start to bring the program to prominence. He kind of started the regional training center down there, which is our Olympic program now. But anyway, so I met him in 2010, and this time he was working for a company, and he said, man, I really want to make a comeback and try to make the Olympic team in 2012. He said, but the problem is I was one of those guys. I loved wrestling. I didn't like strength training. I did it because I had to. Yeah. He's like, now I've been on the couch for 2 years. He's like, I'm a dad. I've never been away from the sport or from training in 2 years. He's like, I don't know how to get back into shape. And I didn't have to depend on strength training before because I was just such a natural athlete. He's like, but now I know it's going to have to be a major part of what I do or else I'm not going to be able to come back. And I remember right away, like the wrestling fan in me was like, oh my God, I might get to work with Tommy Rollins. Yeah. And my instant reaction was, let me help you. It wasn't like, hey, let's try to schedule some appointments or how much can I charge this guy? I just was like, any way possible that I can help this guy, I just know it's the right thing to do. Yeah. And so for the next 2 years, he lived in, I think, Hilliard at the time. He would drive out here 3 days a week. I trained him, just trained him for free, just helping him whenever I could, rearrange my schedule if I needed to, because I was like, this is a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm gonna help Tommy Rollins. We're gonna make the Olympic team. I don't know what's gonna come out of this. I just know I should do it. And I think he kind of also too him training here. He kind of caught the fever again for training. Got back into it, started competing internationally again. Went into the Olympic trials in 2012. Ranked maybe 5th or 6th on the Olympic ladder. Ended up making the Olympic trial finals again. Lost a heater to Jake Varner, who then went on to win gold in the Olympics in London, which I can remember the reaction from people when I tell them, they're like, oh, well, that's great that at least he lost to the best guy. I'm like, no, that's even worse.
Yeah.
Because from his perspective, it's like he was that close. To know that you barely lose in the finals to the guy who makes the team, who then goes on to win the Olympic gold. Yeah. So obviously that was a huge, I don't want to say disappointment, that's the wrong word, but just kind of a heartbreak. My heart broke for him.
A little bit of a letdown, and
You never want to say that anyone deserves anything, but if there's ever anyone I met who deserved to make the Olympic team or deserve an Olympic gold, it was Tommy Rollins.
Yeah.
Just an outstanding individual, And he was really the first high-level athlete I worked with, and it really changed the way I thought about training athletes. Before, my base was kind of bodybuilding. I had a little bit of powerlifting mixed in there. I played around with kind of some CrossFit style training, but it was more like, hey, I'm just going to train someone and give them a very hard workout. I'm just going to crush them and see what happens. Whereas when I started training him, I started realizing, man, I need to put a lot more thought into my programming. Mm-hmm. This is a big deal. This guy's trying to make the Olympic team. We're not just trying to look more ripped at the pool or just trying to bench 20 more pounds than we did last year.
Yep.
This is about performance. But I had to be able to put my own spin on it, So he really changed the way I operated as a trainer. And then I remember after everything settled down with the Olympics that year, he kind of went dark on me for a month or so, and then he reached back out to me and said, man, I just want to tell you I appreciate everything you did to help me. I know I couldn't have got back to that high of level of a competitor without your help. And I know the guys down here at the regional training center, Reese Humphrey, Angel Escobedo, Tervel Delagna, these guys, going forward, he's like, I'm retired now, I'm done. I gave it one last stab. I need to concentrate on my family now. He's like, but these guys, they're gonna, they're gonna be making a run and making the world an Olympic team, and they need help. They don't have a strength coach down there. He's like, would you be interested in going down, a couple of days a week and volunteering? I was like, absolutely.
Yeah.
So he introduced me to Lou Roselli and Tom Ryan. I sat down with them, and they said, hey, sure. If you want to come down and help the guys, sure. And so for 3 days a week, this was starting in 2012, I drove from here down to Ohio State, for a half day in the mornings, and we would work with their Olympic level guys. And some days there would be 3 or 4 guys, some days there would be 1, some days I'd get there and show up and none of them would show up. But for the most part, it was just me and Reese Humphrey the whole time. And I can remember, at this time, the gym was doing okay. My training business was struggling a little bit. I didn't have any type of online presence or anything like that. And that, it even started to cause a little bit of friction where my wife would say, hey, you're losing money by going down there.
Yeah.
Gas money, time away from the gym, you could be scheduling clients. And I said, I've committed to these guys. I've committed to Coach Ryan. I don't know if anything's going to come out of it, but I just know it's the right thing to do. I know I can make an impact on these guys.
Yeah.
And I have to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that next year, 2013, we put 5 guys on the world team. 5 out of 7 or 8 weight classes, which has never been done before by a regional training center, and probably will never be done again. Because there's so much parity now. But after about the first year, Coach Ryan kind of saw what I was doing, saw the impact I was making on some of these guys. And at the time, his son Jake was kind of what they call gray shirting. He wasn't enrolled in school yet. He was taking classes at Columbus State, then he was going to redshirt the year after because of the way they were trying to space the weight classes. He said, hey, my son's, he can't be a part of the team yet, but he can still come to the RTC practice. Would you want to work with him? I said, well, yeah, of course, So Jake started training with Reese Humphrey and I. And after about a month, I get this text message out of nowhere from Coach Ryan. He said, hey, I want to sit down and talk. I wrestled my son the other day, and last time I wrestled him, he felt like wrestling my daughter. He said, now he feels like a grown man.
Yeah.
He's like, can you meet for lunch?
Awesome.
And I said, well, yeah, of course. So then he started kind of bringing me into the program, giving me a little bit of responsibility. I started working with some of the guys who were redshirting. And then, kind of fast forward another year after that, they put me on the payroll with the Regional Training Center, and then I kind of became the de facto strength coach for Ohio State, because then what they started doing was they started filtering all the strength training for the wrestling team through the Regional Training Center, and ended up, having a good run down there for 6 or 7 years. I trained the team directly. We won the first NCAA title in team history, won 3 Big Ten titles, lots of individual NCAA and Big Ten titles, and had a really good run with them.
That's awesome. Did you get pushback from anyone at the university that you weren't one of their? I mean, I having dealt with strength coaches my whole life, I can just imagine the attitude you might have gotten off some people. So
when I was first there was Coach Anthony Glass was the head of the strength department there, and he was kind of the one who worked with. He was what they call the head of Olympic sports. So he worked with everything except for football and basketball. Mm-hmm. So technically wrestling fell under his plate. And Coach Glass and I actually had a really good working relationship. I think in some ways it was almost, because he'd been there for 20 years. He'd been there through the Trestle years and all that stuff. Yeah. It was almost one more thing off of his plate.
Yeah,
you know? And I think because I gained his respect, he came over and watched what I did, and he saw me training with the guys, which is something that most strength coaches do not do. I'm in the trenches with them, and I think by gaining his respect like that, I think there's a part of him that knew I was going to do a better job than his interns who would normally be working with the team.
Yeah.
So I think, for a guy like Glass who had been in the game for so long, he's actually the head of the strength department at Appalachia State now.
Okay.
So I think for him to kind of take his ego out of it and probably recognize that it actually was the best thing for the team was really big, And he and I had a great relationship until he left. And then now there had been some pushback now whenever he left. Mickey Marotti took over the strength department.
Yes. Right.
Mickey and I got along great and everything. He brought in another woman, Heather Mason, who's over top of everything. And she kind of wanted to have more of a definite line between the RTC and between Ohio State, which is fine. I'm still the RTC strength coach. I work with the Olympic level guys, but as of last year, I no longer work with the Ohio State guys.
Sure.
And so they ended up creating a position specifically for that. They hired Riley Ross, great guy. They brought him in, from I think he was down in Florida before this. And but it's one of those things. I could have applied for that job and worked for the university, but then I'm there full time. I can't run my gym.
Yeah.
I got to abandon my supplement line. I can't have my ebooks and all these other things are connected to my business now. So I had to kind of make a choice. For a long time, I kind of had my cake and could eat it too.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of had the best of both worlds. I was the RTC strength coach, but I also got to train the Buckeyes.
Yeah.
Where I was like, okay, well, if you want to train the Buckeyes, you have to be a university employee, which to most people would sound great.
Unless you don't want to be poor.
well, that's one thing. And, I've worked for myself my whole life.
Right.
And then to go into a very corporate environment, I just was really not interested in it.
It would be very difficult. I was talking to Judd Logan at University of Ashland, who's one of my mentors, and he was talking about all these Division I schools offering him a ton of money to come be their head track coach. And I was like, well, how did you turn that down? And he said, how much money would it take for you to go work for somebody? Because he's the head track coach. Right. They wanted him to be the throws coach. He goes, how much money would it take for you to go work for somebody? And I said, man, I've got everything I need. I don't think I want a boss, I don't know how much money it would actually take to get me to do that.
I mean, when I need to take time off, I can take time off. Now, the downside is, I got to pay for my own insurance. I got no sick pay.
Sure,
stuff.
Yeah.
But when obviously this afternoon I'm not going to have time. But if I wanted my kids to come in and get a workout with my kids, or let my wife, if she has appointments or whatever, I need to watch them while I'm training people, or whatever, I can do that stuff.
Yeah.
When you work for someone else, you can't do that.
Yeah, it's it's not for everybody. There's plenty of people out there. I tell people, again, talking about my friend Steve, who runs a gym out in Philly, I say, because people ask me all the time, hey, I'm thinking about starting my own facility, yada, yada, yada. And I said, you should follow Steve Pulcinella on social media for a year before you're allowed to open a gym, because he details every incident that happens at his gym. And I call him the beaming ray of sunshine, because he is not happy unless he's miserable. So, and this is one of my best friends. So, all this stuff, like he videos himself going into the bathrooms in the morning and having to clean up people's shit off the toilet, and then, having to argue with homeless guys in his parking lot. And it's like, you need to see all the pitfalls of being your own business owner before you go into this, because it's not all, hey, sunshine, great athletes coming in your door every day to train.
And that's the part that most people don't see on social media, like a plunge in the toilets and things like that. And I always say, the gym would make a great reality show if someone wanted to send a camera crew from Netflix or whatever, because the things that happen here, you would would not believe,
Yeah, that's crazy. It really is. There's so much drama, and we've got a good group, but there's always something going on with somebody somewhere that would make an excellent reality TV show for sure. Speaking of social media a little bit, we have something like 45,000 followers. How does something like that happen? I mean, how quickly did that happen for you?
It happened very slowly, actually. So around the same time I started down at the RTC is when I started an Instagram. So that would have been 2012, and I started training Reese Humphrey. And Reese and I, Reese has a huge Instagram account as well. I think he has 60,000 followers. He's actually the head RTC coach now in New Jersey. He's made the world team 3 times, very well known in the wrestling world. But he and I started, it kind of was almost born out of, we wanted a way to capture the shit that we were doing almost after our workouts. Because we would do these insanely hard workouts, and then we'd be like, all right, let's walk on our hands and race down the road and see who can win. Or let's see who can climb a rope upside down blindfold. We started doing all these kind of, I don't want to call them tricks, but almost like challenges.
Yeah.
And that was and Instagram just kind of happened to be the perfect way to capture that. At first it was just pictures, and right around the same time is when they started adding video. At first it was just 15-second videos. And so it was kind of the perfect medium for us to kind of show people what we were doing, and for me as a coach to be able to teach. Say if you're a 13-year-old wrestler in North Dakota somewhere, and the only exposure you have to weightlifting is some 50-year-old football coach who's been doing the same workout since the 80s, and they're not
got from the Russians, quote unquote,
and they're not teaching you anything about grip strength or how to prioritize the posterior chain or any of these things. And I was like, wow, this is a way for me to start teaching people the way I'm training these high-level athletes down here, and I can really help any of these kids out there that don't have access to a high-level trainer. So I can still remember, that first year or two when I finally hit 1,000 followers. I thought that was a big deal.
Yeah.
And I remember I was like, wow, Reese just hit 7,000 and I hit 1,000. I mean, we thought we were like big time,
Yeah.
And then from 1,000 to 10,000 was a very slow climb. And then it seemed like from 10,000 to 25,000 went very fast.
Right.
It started really gaining, some momentum. And then after that, it's kind of slowed again or whatever, but it still gradually, kind of creeps up or whatever. But I think the key is for any of you that are listening that are trying to grow your social media following is that I did it by continually trying to teach people, and trying to showcase what I do. They're not just, it's not just a picture every day of me flexing in the mirror and then writing my workout underneath of it, because there's a billion accounts on Instagram that are showing that. So yes, if you have muscles or whatever, you want to show that because that's advertising or that's showcasing, the hard work you put in. But if you're not leading with value and, teaching people something they didn't already know or trying to help them, then why would anyone follow you?
Yeah.
So I think that it's been a good mix of me putting out interesting content that's, interesting, subject-wise, but also visually. People want good camera work. They want high-quality photos. They want something that looks cool, but also, too, that has to be something that's going to help them, or else they'll just keep scrolling.
And I this is what I noticed with your Instagram page. That's exactly what I noticed, is that you're educating and getting information out to people. And it inspired me, and I had a talk with my kind of second in command for the gym and the podcast about how we need to start doing more of that, because one of the things I lament is that I can only deal with the people that walk through my door,
Right.
And if I can't get everybody in through my door, how do I get this information that I've acquired through 35 years of training to everybody else? Because I think there's a huge lack of fundamentals with people, and you see guys that are Instagram famous, or they're all of a sudden strength gurus that just don't have that fundamentals. They don't have those fundamentals that give them the street cred to be able to be training people. They just have interesting Instagram accounts where they're doing, one arm snatches with 225 because they're freak shows, They're not, they don't have anything behind that. But yeah, that was one of the things that I really, when I found your Instagram account, I was like, this is what we need to be doing,
Well, I think so I'm gonna give you some advice now, and for anyone else, that's listening to this, is that one of the things that I try to do when I teach on there is I try not to beat people over the head with how smart I am. Mm-hmm. Now, part of that might be is because I'm not super smart, But I mean, I have my CSCS. I'm a college graduate. I've been doing this for years and stuff. But even when I come across a post that is informative from another strength coach or whatever, if I start reading it and it's fucking 2,000 words, I get bored and don't want to read it.
Yeah.
Don't just beat me over the head with big words. So when you are teaching on there, keep in mind there's going to be your peers that are reading, but there's also going to be a 14-year-old kid somewhere that's maybe discovering strongman for the first time, and if you talk over his head, then he's going to lose interest.
Absolutely.
So I try to break things down. I don't want to say dumb it down, because it's not dumb it down. You want to teach people in a way that people can understand and they can take it and apply. They don't need to see you reference every study out there or whatever, but give them the basics so they understand the concept, how to apply it, and how to help them improve.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, I think people will, they'll buy into your teaching style, versus reading, paragraph upon paragraph.
Yeah, that's a really good point. One of my, in jiu-jitsu, one of the big time coaches right now is John Donaher. And John is a genius. I mean, he's brilliant. He's kind of revolutionized jiu-jitsu, but he'll put out these Instagram posts that are hundreds and hundreds of words, and I have to admit, I go through and I get to the first paragraph and I'm like, okay, I'm on to something else now.
Yeah, so even a guy who you respect, who you want to learn from, who probably has tons of knowledge to give you, you don't feel like reading it.
Right.
It's too much.
Yeah. There's one out every day. You can be like a book,
Yeah, so I think that's one tip I got for you. I think the other tip is you almost, just like we kind of talked about before we got on here about, we don't want to talk too long before we get on the podcast, because then we have to try to recreate things we've already talked about. So same thing when you're teaching in the gym, you need someone there to capture some of the teaching you're doing in the moment. So as you're teaching someone, you're then capturing it and then can repackage that. Like, okay, maybe this goes on my Instagram story, and then we'll put it on my Facebook story. Then we can put that on IG Live or on YouTube or whatever. You need to almost batch create content. Because if not, you could spend all day doing nothing but spinning your wheels and trying to create content.
Sure, yeah.
And it is the ultimate goal of doing this is so that you can have more time to work out with your wife, or to chase your wife's cat across the yard when it gets loose or whatever. Batch create your content, and it'll appear more genuine that way too.
Yeah. So, and it's important. People who don't understand, and one of the things that I get, and a lot of guys in my generation don't get, is the social media thing. The thing that is important about having 45,000 followers is you're getting to touch all those people, and you're getting to put them in the right direction.
Well, not to cut you off, but no, along those lines, I answer every single DM I get.
Yes.
I respond to every comment I get. There's never going to be a day where I look at someone and say, that's a stupid question, I'm not going to answer it.
Right.
And there are times where I think that, and I'm like, this fucking guy, saying, what's the best thing to get strong for wrestling? Like, aren't you paying attention to my channel? So then I'll reply to him and I'll say, deadlift, row, squat, press, carries. And then they'll respond, Coach Myers, thanks so much for responding. You're a huge inspiration, blah, blah, blah. And then I feel like, oh man, like, I can't believe I had that initial reaction. Right. It's just a reminder of, like, you know what? People are reaching out for a reason. They're hungry for knowledge. They're hungry for help. And I almost feel like it's my responsibility to help every single one of them. Now, sometimes it drives my wife nuts because, we're out to dinner with the family, and on the way there, I'm like, but she's kind of gotten used to it. She, even my kids look at it as like, well, Daddy's working.
Yeah.
They're not like, oh, he's answering his DMs. Like, well, no, this is the function of my work. I need to work right now. So
we were down in St. Pete Beach, where we go for vacation a lot, and I'm the same way. So I'm available every waking hour. Like if a message comes through, I answer it, between the gym and the podcast and everything. And I'm down there.
Well, because people would take it personal. If you didn't answer, they'd say, fuck his podcast. I'm not listening anymore.
Right. Or who does this guy think he is?
Right.
So I answer them all. And, I'm down there on vacation and I go out to swim and I come back and I grab my phone and there's a couple messages and I answer them. And for me, it's not a big deal because number one, I'm talking about something I love. And number two, it takes 30 seconds. But my wife kind of cornered me and said, hey, you're on fucking vacation.
Right.
Cut this shit out. You don't have to work continuously. So I took that to heart. And so now I work on that phone and in the gym and on the podcast until 6 o'clock at night. My wife gets home from work. My son's home from wherever the hell he is. I throw the phone away.
I hope my wife don't hear this, so she's gonna put the pressure on me.
It's super tough. But then I wake up at 4 a.m. and it's just like text all the way down. So
no, I tell you what, man, I'm gonna take. Maybe I might do 7. I might not do 6, but I'm gonna really try to do that. We got vacation coming up next week, and what I do on vacation is, I still get up at 4:30 or 5 every day, and kind of our rule on vacation is I can be on the phone and doing content and stuff until my kids get up.
Right.
Then I give my phone to my wife and I say, hide it from me.
Yeah.
Lock it in the hotel safe or whatever, and then give it back to me tomorrow morning. But I need to institute something like that because just like we talked about being available, we need to be available for our kids and for our wives and stuff too.
Yeah. And it took her getting pissed at me for me to realize it was an issue, which is, for me, I'm a meathead, and a lot of times it takes getting beat over the head a little bit with something before you go, oh, okay, so maybe it's not a big deal for me, but it is a big deal for other people. But I can't, I can imagine with as many followers as you have that it's a constant battle to constantly, and it probably for you, like you said, it's not a big deal to answer these things, but it's a lot of work still.
It's a lot of work, but I gotta say it's a blessing to even be in a position that people want to listen to what I have to say.
Right.
So I can never be mad about it.
Yeah.
Because 7-8 years ago or whatever, before social media, no one knew who I was. I was doing the same things I'm doing now. It's no different. Maybe I wasn't working with the high profile athletes now, at Ohio State or any of that stuff, but training wise, lifestyle wise, I was still doing the same thing. Just no one knew about us. No one knew about Old School Gym back then. But it's, Arnold had never walked through the doors yet or anything like that.
Awesome picture, by the way.
So. No, it's you'll never catch me complaining about having to answer DMs or anything like that.
Yeah, it's not like we're pulling crab traps in the Bering Sea or something.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about what you do with the athletes because it fascinates me. So I came out of a throwing background. So for 17 years, I was a professional Highland Games athlete. So it was all about one explosive movement, sit down for 10 minutes till the next time to do something explosive, shot put, hammer, that kind of stuff. And then when I got out of that, and especially when I got into jiu-jitsu, my philosophies on training changed drastically. So we talked a little bit how we train people where it's similar to the functional fitness stuff, and I don't say the name brand because I don't want to get sued. It's definitely functional fitness, but instead of high-level gymnastics, we're throwing a lot of strongman stuff in there, a lot of weighted carries, a lot of sled drags, that kind of stuff. And it looks like you do a lot of the same similar stuff down here. So maybe give us a rundown of, I know, everything's different, but what's your philosophy? What do you get into?
Well, so, the number one thing is my athletes need to be strong. So we got to work on absolute strength. So from that perspective, there's always going to be a hinge movement. We're always going to prioritize the deadlift with my wrestlers. We're always going to do some type of press, typically some type of bench press variation. We're always going to do some type of squat variation. Now it changes during the type of year. Right now we're in the off season, so we back squat. Then we'll get into front squat and Zercher squat. And then once we're in the season, we do more of a unilateral stuff, split squat and things like that. So we have to get stronger, and that's one of the biggest misconceptions with wrestling training. When you look back in the day, it was all circuit training. It was all just endurance-based stuff.
Right.
So you look, the absolute strength has to come first. And then when people, and this word is kind of confused a lot, but they think of, sport-specific training. And they think, okay, for it to be sport-specific, that means I have to be in a wrestling stance and rowing or whatever. No, I can still take a basic movement and make it more sports specific by let's say for example, a movement that we use to build absolute strength would be a T-bar row or a dumbbell row. Very low reps, 3 to 5 reps, very heavy. If I want to make it more sport specific, we may do towel rows, or so now we're working more of our grip. That's one of the ways we would make it, sport specific. Or a weighted hyperextension, for strength, a heavy weighted hyperextension. We may then pause at the top and have someone pull on the neck. So now we're engaging the entire posterior chain from the neck down,
I love that.
just like when someone pulls on your neck when you're grappling. And then the underpinning of all that is your work capacity. Your aerobic capacity, but more of a kind of a functional work capacity. And that's when we use a lot of the GPP stuff, the carries, the sled work, and things like that. But also too, I know I'm kind of jumping around here.
No, go ahead.
We do sled work for absolute strength. We do sled work for speed. We do kind of burst training, intervals on it, and we also do it for prehab. We do it for conditioning. So we use sled work for all those things.
Yeah, right.
Just like we use body weight training for all those things. So I don't really have one overarching statement that I can make about how I train my wrestlers. But number one, they have to be strong. Number two, they have to have a good aerobic base so they can recover between those intense bouts, those intense scrambling. They have to be functionally strong in certain positions. So the posterior chain has to be strong. Their hips, glutes have to be strong. Grip, pulling. We have to prioritize pulling over pressing. And they have to be able to, they have to have a high anaerobic threshold because they have to sprint over and over and over again throughout the match and then recover. So it's a lot.
I look at it, and we're talking wrestlers now, but I look at it as, for the majority of athletes, now I'm not talking elite shot putters and discus throwers, maybe, some super powerful athletes where they get a long break in between, but even those athletes at the junior high and high school level especially all need that shit. Whether they're whether they're a shot putter or a football player or a wrestler or a volleyball player or a softball player, they need all that stuff that you just described. That's Absolutely. How they all should be training.
I just gave one of my ebooks the other day. So I have a youth strength conditioning training manual that basically teaches you how to train youth athletes from 5 years old all the way up through junior high. And I gave this to one of my wrestling dads. I trained his son, who's in my junior high wrestling group, because his daughter is like 8 or 9 years old and wants to start working out. I said, hey, you can use the intermediate plan in here. He said, well, she plays volleyball. She don't wrestle. I said, well, yeah, you can take out maybe some of the grip specific stuff, right, but all the other programming in there is going to help any athlete. Yep. It's going to help her run faster, be able to jump higher. She's going to be stronger. She's going to have better anti-rotational strength. All these things that is important for any athlete.
Keep them injury free.
Exactly.
And this is what Louis talked about, is building the base of that pyramid so big, especially with those young athletes, is, you want to have that huge base of shit that they can do everything. They can do a yoke carry, and they can do a perfect front squat, and they can do a power clean, and they can do multiple pull-ups, and they should be able to do all that stuff. Mm-hmm. We have a gentleman who comes into my gym whose son is training with a former powerlifter, and there's not a lot of movement going on from what he's telling me. It's a lot of bench, squat, deadlift, which I'm sure that guy knows pretty damn well.
Well, and it will get that kid stronger.
It's gonna be better than the kid sitting on the couch. But I don't want to be the guy. I'm never going to be the guy who says, no, you should just bring him over to me. But right. I'm waiting for him to see the light and say, oh, maybe my kid should be lifting sandbags, and maybe my kid should be doing heavy carries and zerker squats and all this shit that is actually going to transfer over to what he does on the mat every day.
Right.
And
when people train, and again, that could still be the base of his training, mm-hmm. but if that's really all you're doing, you might be getting stronger, but you're not getting more athletic.
Right.
Like I said, my original base in training was bodybuilding. Mm-hmm. So I used to do natural bodybuilding years ago. So when we first opened the gym, I trained everyone like a bodybuilder.
Sure.
And then I got into boxing, and so then I got real into conditioning work. When I was growing up and wrestling stuff, I hated conditioning. But then when I started boxing, I liked it only because I realized, the better shape I get in, the less I'm getting beat up.
100%.
So that was what kind of made me fall back in love with conditioning. But so then I started training everyone like a boxer. It was real conditioning heavy. What I started realizing is you need anyone, I don't care whether you're a soccer mom or whether you're an elite athlete, you need to be well-rounded.
Yes.
And now I think not just my training that I do with my athletes, but the training I do myself, I feel very well-rounded. Now I'm not I'm 40 years old and I've always been a very average athlete, average strength. So I'm not really quote unquote good at anything, but I can do everything.
Mm-hmm.
I can do a powerlifting workout. I can do bodybuilding style stuff. I just did a triathlon last month.
Awesome.
You know, I can do whatever it is. If it involves getting your heart rate up, exerting force, I can do it.
Yeah.
You know, I might not be great at it, but whether it's, you know, CrossFit or powerlifting or bodybuilding, I can do it all.
Yeah.
And I do some touch of that stuff every week.
Yeah.
So
it's again, my training started to adapt when I got back into grappling, and I remember the first day going in there and rolling with the black belt who was 170 pounds, and you know, I'm on top of him, and I thought I was in pretty good condition, you know, but within 3 or 4 minutes I was gasping and, you know, I couldn't breathe, and he was like, it's a whole different world, isn't it? And I'm like, yeah. So then I started to look for ways to mimic that,
right.
You know, but it's important to be strong while you're doing that. You can't have one or the other. You have to have them both.
Well, and probably what you're starting to realize now too, I did some jiu-jitsu back in the days, and I remember one of the hardest things when I first started getting in there grappling with these guys, because I was strong. Like I said, back then I was training like a bodybuilder. I was very strong. I didn't understand how not to squeeze so hard all the time.
Yes.
I didn't know how to relax.
Right, yeah.
And when you squeeze very hard, you know, for a minute, you're going to be exhausted.
Yep.
You know, so learning how to flow with it and utilize, now you're probably learning how to utilize your strength and pick your spots.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're not going to become tired as much.
Right.
So
yeah, and it's important. You know, Matt Wenning has a quote that I put up on the wall, and it's something to the effect of, if you're not strong with a fucked up heart rate, you're not strong. You know, and coming from Matt, who was a 300-pound plus powerlifter, that's something to be said. But I love it. I love what you're doing. I think what you're doing with the kids here is inspiring to me. And it's amazing that you get to work with these high-level athletes too. And I'm guessing with some variations, the program isn't that much different that you probably do with the younger ones as the older ones.
No,
the intensity needs to vary.
So my high school athletes do pretty much the same thing I do with my Olympic level guys.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there's some changes here and there, and I have to adapt things for kids based on their experience level. But for the most part, they're doing, you know, very similar things. And when you look at the kids that I have, you know, the wrestlers that come to me, you know, in 8th or 9th grade that stay with me throughout their high school career, the amount of strength they have by the time, you know, they're seniors in high school, you know, 150-pound kids deadlifting 455.
Yeah.
And you're going to tell me when you go out there on the mat and they grab a hold of another 150-pound kid that doesn't deadlift,
yep.
What do you think the difference is going to feel? You know, strength is not the only factor, but it's a factor.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, my guys they're strong. They're strong in the right areas. They're balanced, and they don't get tired.
Yeah.
You know, so that's if you can have those things even without any technique, you're going to win a lot of wrestling matches.
Sure.
You know, so the type of training that they do is very similar, you know, to what my elite guys do. And now, what's really good, I know you talked earlier about, you know, wanting to be able to impact more than just the people that come through your door. What I've kind of transitioned a lot of my business to where now I'm educating coaches. Coaches and parents, because there's so many parents out there that they have to take it upon their own hands to strengthen their kids because either the school's not doing it, their club coaches don't have the resource or whatever. And so I have a whole ebook series, wrestling strength conditioning, strength conditioning for wrestling. You know, I have in-season, off-season, preseason editions, youth editions. Those are all available on my website at oldschoolgym.com.
I'm going to link all that stuff up
Awesome.
there too. I know you have a hard out. What time do you have to get out of here?
What's that we got here?
It's 9:27 right now.
I got another 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay, cool. Let's talk a little bit about. Hopefully this won't. I'll let you know when we're 5 minutes is up. But let's talk a little bit about the youth coming into facilities like this today. So what I'm seeing is mom bringing in a kid because she's been lifting maybe, and the kid is been doing nothing but playing video games and sitting on the couch. And not only is the kid super soft, but mom is catering to every need he has.
Right.
So I deal with that kid, or I deal with the kid whose father is overly involved with their sport, but doesn't believe in the strength training aspect of it.
Right.
So I deal with those two athletes, and it becomes a source of frustration for me. But I kind of want to know what your thoughts are on youth today in general as far as training, because it is different than it was 10 years ago.
Well, I think, okay, so first I'll talk in specifics about my gym here, then I'll kind of talk, bigger picture, general. My view is going to be somewhat skewed, and that is because most of the athletes that come here that I work with are wrestlers. They already know me because of Ohio State Wrestling. Mm-hmm. They already follow my Instagram. The parents have already found me, through Instagram, or because locally I've had a lot of success. I've sent a lot of, I shouldn't say I've sent, but a lot of my high school wrestlers then have went on to the D1, D2, D3 level. They've wrestled in college. They've won state titles here in Ohio. So now because of that reputation, kids and parents come here and they already know what they're getting. So I'm kind of blessed in that sense of most of the kids I'm getting
aren't being dragged in.
They're not being dragged in.
Right.
They're already the kids that want to improve.
Yep.
They're already somewhat of a high level high school or junior high wrestler. They want to get better. They look at coming here as like, oh, I'm getting to train with these guys at this place. They've already seen the place. We've done such a good job of capturing what the aura of the place is. So there's not a lot of mystery involved. So I don't really deal with that much. And maybe if I started training more athletes, I would. But right now, I've just, I Thomas, who you met when I come in, who's excellent. Any of the football players, anything like that, I shove them off to him.
Okay.
I only work with wrestlers. I only train certain hours of the day, and that's it. But I think in general, now we're going to talk more specific. Before we're talking about my experience, but in general about the youth of today.
Yeah.
And this is where we're going to sound like old men.
I know. I do all the time.
I think, you always hear people say, "Oh, kids today are lazy," and this. I don't believe that. I don't believe that kids are lazy or any different than they were when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, or any different than when you grew up. But what I think is, there's a couple things here. Number one, in general, life is easier than it used to be. Mm-hmm. The life is much more convenient. There's not a lot of work that is done on a daily basis. Growing up, I had to, take out the trash. I had to wash the dishes. I had to cut the grass, and I had to do all these things that were expected, and I might get $5 a week for allowance.
Right.
Things were just hard. And I didn't even live like on a farm, farm kids had it much tougher,
Sure.
So the way of life is just much easier. Things are much more convenient now. So there's that at play. And then there's also kind of the, kids today have so many more options. When we were bored, when we were kids, it was, we'll go out and play.
Yeah.
And even when we didn't want to, we did, because the alternative was like, well, I don't want to play checkers, or I don't have anyone to, play. I'm playing solitaire and I played 50 games and there's no one to play cards with anymore. So you go out and you climb trees, or you run around the yard, you invent some game, you throw sticks, or whatever you do as a kid. Well, today, if kids are bored, they can jump on their tablet. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's necessarily the kid's fault. It's the parents' fault.
Yeah, I think so too.
I set limits with my kids. When I come home, like, Jack, put down the tablet, we're going outside. And it's like, okay, well, he'll either say, okay, well, let's work out. I let him pick, or he can ride a scooter, or we'll just walk around the yard, or we'll do something. We're not going to just sit in the house and the default activity be play on the tablet.
Yeah.
That's just not happening.
Yep.
So I think that's part of it, is we're dealing with a generation of kids, and I don't think it's their fault. They've grown up with these devices. It's been normalized. They see that, and why wouldn't they? Their mom's sitting there on Facebook all day playing Candy Crush or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
Their dad's, listening to your podcast and looking at my Instagram all day or whatever, and that's just the way of life.
Yeah, or the dad is beyond. Well, that's a shitty way of putting it. Let's say dad is not the physical role model we'd like to see. Obviously, your father was that physical role model who showed you how to train, and you looked up to that. And I had an uncle that was that way too. I wanted to be just like Uncle Butch because he was super jacked, and I wish kids had more of those people. So when they come into my gym, I tell my wife that I try to be that guy. I try to be Uncle Butch for every one of those kids that comes in. And hopefully out of the 10 or 15 that come in, 6 or 7 of them will remember that, and it'll change their life for the better, at least physically,
Absolutely.
But I think we need more of that. We need more parents training as well as the kids.
Well, I'm going to take that same point and kind of pivot a little bit, because it was something that made me think of when I'm sitting here looking at this picture of your emblem and the name Refined Savage, and I started thinking about what that kind of means to me. And I think I don't know how you came up with the name, but what that kind of means to me is I'm going to say a lot of people, their idea of masculinity, what it means to be a savage, what it means to be tough, is skewed and not accurate.
Yeah, yes.
I grew up, my dad, was teaching me how to lift. He worked in the steel mill. He was in every way, in our town, he was kind of a legendary badass, had been in a million bar fights and all this stuff. Yeah. But guess what? He knew how to cook. He was nice to his wife. I never even thought anything was weird about this. Every time I see my dad, I hug him, I kiss him on the cheek. I can remember one time, I can't remember what the function was, but I was maybe 7 or 8, 9 years old. But, my dad, I gave him a hug and, we kissed each other on the cheek. I can remember some of the kids from school saw it and they were like, "Ooh, you kissed your dad, that's gay." I was like, "What?" I was like, "Why wouldn't you kiss your dad? Right. You love your dad."
Yeah, right.
And so I think I grew up with a different idea of what it means to be. I shouldn't say different. I should say just what I would call a more correct idea of what it means to be a man. You can still be this alpha male, this savage, and still be nice to your wife, faithful to your wife, still 100%. Love your kids, be nice to the people that come through your door. Being a tough guy and being strong doesn't mean being an asshole.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you can't like gardening and landscaping and all these other things that I find joy in. You don't have. So I think maybe to me that's what it means to be my old man Kim Myers is a refined savage.
Yeah.
He taught me how to cook. He taught me how to respect others. Taught me not to throw litter out the window and things like that, but also to be tough, to stand up for yourself, stand up for what's right, to work hard, not be afraid to get your hands dirty and things like that.
Yeah, my wife came up with the name for the show, and the whole thing is when I was a professional Highland Games athlete, I was a savage, man. All I did was I trained and I threw and got paid and paid my bills by throwing far, and it was this lifestyle where I was on the road every weekend, and there was bars and broads and everything else. This was pre-her, right. But it was this savage lifestyle, and I was kind of a dickhead because all the guys I was throwing against were trying to beat me.
You were just immersed in that life.
I was trying to get their money, and they were trying to get my money. And then when I retired from the sport, things started to change. I started to read more, and I met my wife, and we got married, and I quit my job and opened my own gym, and things just started to snowball, but that savagery was still there. I was still training my ass off.
You didn't have to leave it behind.
I didn't have to leave it behind in order to read a book for an hour every morning.
Right. You're still the same guy that was doing that stuff.
Yep. I just found different aspects of it. And that's 100%. You can do all those things. You can be nice to your wife, and you can still, stand up for yourself when you need to. All those things are together. So that's exactly where you're at, where I'm at with it.
Well, I think that's, one of the things I try to show a lot on my Instagram. That's why I always put my kids on there, put my wife on there, put the things I do at home. And I try to show more than just the gym, because I want to inspire that 15-year-old that's watching. It's not just about being a good wrestler and getting strong and training like a savage. You need to be a complete human being.
Absolutely.
You need to be a refined savage.
I like it. Let's end it there. Hey, next time we do this, we're gonna this could go on for hours because we could talk about masculinity and everything else. But I want to thank you for coming on the show. I think this was great. I would love to do it again. And if you are in the Columbus area, you got to check out Old School Gym. And if you're a wrestler, you're not training here, I don't know what the fuck's wrong with you. So get a hold of Dustin on social medias, and I'll put all that stuff out there. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it.
All right, guys. It's been the Refined Savage. See ya.